Fortuna. In the late winter of that year, gleaming Kelon finally closed the gates of war. With Meletus slain, the stone-toothed dead by his own hand, and the false Kaisa ripped apart by those he had trusted, Tychon Otho remained as the sole and true emperor in Noria. As per custom, upon his return the emperor ascended the Tourmaline spire, then went down to the tomb of his predecessors. It is said that he spent the entire night before the grave of Melanthios the Great, ruminating on the task now before him, how to rule well, and how history might judge his works. From Alcos Tygathon's Modern Times, Book 14, Chapter 23. Fortuna couldn't sleep. Instead of drifting off to whatever place Shy Estelle might beckon, they persisted, warm and writhing in the night. They needed to sleep. They had to sleep. But they could not. Again Fortuna turned onto their back and counted the wooden beams above in the dull moonlight. 20 and 5, 20 and 6, 20 and 5. Fortuna tumbled over in bed so they were upright once more. None of it helped. Not with all those thoughts. A past too bitter to leave, a future too painful to enter. As some bird hooted in the distance, Fortuna closed their eyes and found themselves back in the great hall once more. They had been eating stew with chunks of parsnip, onion, and beef, with Kanta, Meg, and Sir Miles at the high table. That had been the first offense. Only with dignitaries from Nornia or the Circaias did Lucian ever use a high and low table. Now they sat alone, while the household guard, Tarek and Marcus and Andreas, along with Eli, Petrus, and the rest sat below. They had been served the same meal, the same garnishes of horseradish and nuts and fruit. This time, those below had been offered the same number of hard-boiled eggs as well, albeit to share. Fortuna scraped some more horseradish into their mouth and felt it bite against their nose. Troubled? Sir Miles asked. He had spent the past 2 suppers in the hall. To his left were 3 more seats. One was for Brother Preston, should he also join. The second was for Irel, should he wake. The third. Fortuna scowled. How couldn't I be? The day had been bitter enough. Fortuna had awoken aching, knowing what that would soon mean. The men today had been anxious, demanding. Fortuna and Sir Miles had put them in line, until Fortuna had too faltered beneath the afternoon sun. A rider atop a black steed. Brother Preston took his seat next to Sir Miles. His shallow, brown hair was unkempt, and he was sweating profusely. Did that man find what he wanted? Fortuna questioned Brother Preston as he reached for an ear of bread. The rook held it and took a bite, chewing slowly. He wasn't in, the rook sniffed. When I brought him to our collection, such that it is, he spent the better part of 2 hours looking for various scrolls and codices, laying them out and putting them back with a frown. It was most odd. Fortuna offered him some horseradish. Do you know what he was looking for? Brother Preston shot them a look. Not here, it said. Well, he didn't take any himself, he said. I paid mine to every title he had taken a look at. Sections from the annals, law scrolls, marriage contracts, a scroll of fables, inheritances, a most odd sort, if I do so say. I thought he might have chosen a history or 2, but alas, mayhaps he'll try again on the morrow, if he didn't already find his quarry. Fortuna sat a moment. Chronicles of days past, testaments, marriage contracts, fables. What did he want with those? Where is he now? The old rook took an overzealous bite of bread and horseradish. He said, Brother Preston wheezed as his coughing subsided, he wanted a ride. Then soon he'll be back. Sir Miles nodded. Wind's been picking up for the better part of an hour. Just then another powerful gust smashed against the hall, though I don't know where he'd go with all that luggage. It had been a strange sight. That he had returned at all. That he had returned alone. To request a few scrolls from the castle library, yet with enough luggage to ride half a month. Did he say how long he stay? Sir Miles continued. Or does he have some other business? Brother Preston shut his mouth as the door to the great hall opened. Garbed in sunset, through the portal walked a man in black. It was Egg in hand. At his sight, Fortuna grew stiff. It was you. Fortuna knew what was true. He was the one who had shot Irel, who had taken his brother away. It could only have been him. There he stood, wind howling behind him, until from his back slunk a shade, ghoul pale and dressed in white. It was Irel. Fortuna jumped up, only to send stew flowing across the table and into their lap. They bit back a curse as one pain joined another. Snatching up a nearby cloth, Fortuna began vigorously wiping away the bits of stew, until someone grabbed their arm. It was Margaret. A woman of about 50, Margaret had once waited on the Lady Shoshana. More than Lucian or even Brother Preston, it was her who had helped the lady through those final months. Now she merely tended to the castle, little more than the stable-master's wife. Margaret took the cloth from Fortuna and finished the job they had started. Fortuna just stood there, quivering in shame. Nearby someone snickered, and the shame just as soon blossomed into rage. "Brother." Kenta rose from her place at the table's center. "I did not receive word you had awoken." For a moment Fortuna's gaze met theirs. "This calls for celebration," they continued. "Come, join us." Fortuna forced a smile as Tarek, Marcus, and Andreas rose in turn. "We salute you, Lord Irel," they shouted in unison. Fortuna bowed and took a seat, a clenched fist hidden beneath the wood. "That won't be necessary." Irel stepped forward, voice dry. "The counselor and I have cares elsewhere. Margaret," he turned to the serving woman, "please have our meals brought to the library." The serving woman bowed. "As you wish, my lord." "Those pleasantries," Irel replied. "I fear they might be better spent on my sister." The following silence was as glass, rotted steel shattering inside their mind. Fortuna clenched harder, feeling the tendons pull against bone. "Burn your tongue," Meg teased, lips live with malice. Fortuna said nothing. They knew. They had always known. Why hadn't they said anything? "When will you leave?" Kanta finally broke the silence. "On the morrow," Egenhan replied. "At some hour fitting. Come, Irel." He beckoned his ward. "We have work to do." Then he was strutting across the great hall, Irel following after him like. Fortuna rose, a half-formed curse on their tongue. Instead they just stood there, brooding, until they sat down once more. Then the moment was over, and the two of them had passed. Fortuna cursed themselves, having not known what to say. How they wished they had gone down to Egenhand and denounced him for what he was in front of them all. "I know what you did," they would have said. "You shot Irel." Egenhand would have then said that was ridiculous, that they had no proof. "You were quite adamant about him," Fortuna would have continued. "Tell me then, how did you know he was returning home when you left before him? Was that too your design, like how you two had met once before?" "The gods have a sense of humor," he might have said, or enjoys hinting at things to come. "You didn't answer my question," Fortuna would have countered. "Admit it, you have been spying on him. That arrow wasn't meant for any other. No, you merely meant to wound him, burn a few days so he'd had no choice but to join you. But why?" That was the question Fortuna could not answer. The arguments continued, but they blurred together until Fortuna was again staring at the wooden planks above. 20 and 5, 20 and 6, 20 and 5. Fortuna pushed themselves from bed and paced around the moonlit chamber, the old wooden floor smooth against their soles. 20 and 5, 20 and 6, 20 and 5. Fortuna looked up, recognizing steel against cloth. Someone else is out. Fortuna stuck their head out into the cool night air and the cloister overlooking the yard. Below, lit by moons and stars, Sir Miles practiced against a wicker man. Blunt steel struck an arm, then the neck, then the arm, before thrusting into the heart. Thump, 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 thump. "I know you're there, Fortuna." Sir Miles paused without looking up. "You'll have to do better than that if you're trying to sneak up on me." "Just this one—" Gah! Fortuna swore. "If you didn't want to wake me, you wouldn't have been so loud." "Mayhaps." His voice tasted of grindstone. "And you could have stayed in bed. The hour's later than you think." A man of about 60, Castle Ravencroft's master-at-arms was of an age with Fortuna's father, the petty Lord Desmond Whisker. The ruin of 1,000 calluses marred Sir Miles' hands, countless nicks, a face barely concealed by a bushy handlebar moustache. Each of them, however, paled against his crooked nose and the pair of gashes running from beneath his left eye down to his jaw. Despite his age, he was still strong, a bear of a man who sometimes joked of fighting them himself. "How late?" Fortuna spat. "And isn't it that practicing alone only reinforces your own mistakes?" "I'd say so," Sir Miles shrugged. "And it's late enough. How about it then? Guess you couldn't sleep either. Fortuna snatched up the sword leaning against the nearby wall. It was heavy, blunt, and poorly weighted, just as Fortuna wanted it. No. Miles readied as Fortuna struck a series of lashes against the wicker soldier. I mean that in another hour or so it'll be dawn. Fortuna inhaled sharply, cold and dirt and sweat on the air. How? They raised the blade and cracked it over the wicker man's head. Idiots! Hey! Sir Miles gripped their shoulder, hard. That's enough. Enough! Fortuna swung around, the blunt tip at his throat. What do you mean, enough? I mean you need to calm down, Fortuna, Miles said softly, steel fixed on iron. You... Fortuna breathed in, then exhaled sharply. You're right. Forgive me. They lowered the blade. Just do better. Sir Miles turned back to grab his own from the rack. Now, why don't you tell me what's bothering you? He readied himself. Fortuna smirked, raising their own blade in turn. Sure thing, old man. And so their familiar dance began anew. Eye roll. Fortuna began with a thrust, powerful but simple. What about him? Miles parried easily, sidestepped, and followed with a thrust of his own. It's all his fault. Fortuna parried and circled to his left. It was so simple, but then he had to wake up and decide to leave. Again. It would have been so simple, but no. It's just like him, really, to complicate things. He dared come back, only to then leave. Again. And he took Lucian with him. I was so stupid. I let myself believe he'd stay, that all this could have been avoided, that we could continue our work. Which work's that? Miles blocked a blow to the belly. You know. Fortuna dodged Miles next. Making a real change here. Doing more than growing fat on tithes. Actually helping people live how they want. Isn't that what this is all about? Now that can't happen, though. Sir Miles readied another attack. Why? Because Lucian's gone! Fortuna winced as Miles grazed their shoulder. And eye roll with him. Miles went for another attack. You blame yourself for his injury. Fortuna went to block, only for Miles to disengage and hit them on the other. The blow sent Fortuna to the ground, clutching flesh that would soon bruise. Fortuna winced. We're not wearing armor, you goat! So don't get hit. Miles offered Fortuna a hand. For the god of war there is only custom. Victory or death. For they who hesitate have lost. And tonight your mind's elsewhere. Says you. Fortuna got themselves up, and the two began again. What's really bothering you? Sir Miles asked as they traded blows. Fortuna paused, only to suffer a knock to the ribs. They jumped back, hilt low, their blade half black and half polished in the dark. Do I tell him? It's Canta. The words escaped their lips. Fortuna strode forward and a new attack began. Sir Miles met their sword with his. What about her? I fear, Fortuna confessed as they counter-parried. I fear her judgment. Why? Sir Miles blocked their attack, if barely. Fortuna held their tongue. She's different, they finally said. Not like Ira or Lucian. Canta's never listened to me, not truly. Especially not with Meg around. I fear what will happen because of it. Why's that? Miles inquired. Because she just doesn't understand! Fortuna smashed their blade against his. What's the point of being a lord if not to help those below you? That's what Lucian and I did. Tried to do. But Canta will just order people around for its own sake. Grey skies. Black legions. Sir Miles fell to a knee, barely able to withstand Fortuna as they rained down iron upon him. And I just don't think she gets that! With the final strike, Fortuna hooked their blade around and found Miles' side. The graying bear of a man gasped in pain. Does that make sense? Fortuna demanded, catching their breath. Sir Miles wobbled to his feet. Mayhaps. Aye. But I think you're tending the sheep only for its wool. He lowered his blade, inviting an attack. Have at me. Canta. Miles grunted as their blades met. Is Lucian's sister, least you forget. Just as a litter of kittens adopt, their parents look in different ways. It's the same with people. You worry, and she's different, aye, but she was raised alongside you and those you hold dear. Fortuna broke away only to suffer a rap against their wrist. What do you mean? What I said. Miles thrust forward. You may not like it, but Canta's Casimir's daughter as much as Ira and Lucian are his sons. She's got an eye for order, though. I have that much just from the amount of time she spends with my Meg. If anything, in that way Canta's nearly as much mine as Meg's. Sir Miles then caught Fortuna in a bind and sprung the blade from their grasp. You do well not to underestimate her, Miles smirked. Or your opponent, I'd say. It's not her abilities that concern me, Fortuna grimaced, the blade in their hand once more, but her words. You and I both know she'll listen more to Meg than I, and I fear Erdonia will be worse for it. I admit. Miles parried a few more blows. She's gotten a little away from me. She's not the daughter I wish I had, but it's not our place to challenge the gods. So, Fortuna attacked again. Would you stand by Canta even if she errs by your daughter's judgment? Sir Miles stood his ground. I serve Castle Ravencroft, whoever might rule. It's like those kittens again. Fortuna winced at his next blow. Go on. They're different. Miles' attacks slowed, but all still kin. The Lucian's Casimir's more than the others. That's plain enough. Fortuna scowled. I don't like that. Or, old man, did you forget that littermates need not share the same tom? Sir Miles shrugged, the sky beginning to brighten into a creeping pre-dawn gloom. I guess it's a bad metaphor then. I meant to say that, for Iroh and Canta, all that's good in them came from their mother. May she find peace in Dios' twilight halls. And her mother before her, the Lady Samira Argent. Fortuna's blade paused midair. Just how long have you been here, old man? Sir Miles grappled Fortuna's blade, and paused again, his tip pointed at their throat. Long enough. Fortuna jumped back. You speak of the dead as if they're still here. Sir Miles lowered his sword, gloom in his eyes. They are. He was solemn. I can still see 'em, in my dreams. And then I'm young again too, arrow in my back, and horse between my legs. Eyes closed, Miles raised a finger and pointed west. She found me over there, on the other side of the bridge. I'd have died if Lady Samira hadn't nursed me back to health herself, and that same spirit which shone in her eyes passed to her daughter Shoshana and Canta after that. Seeing her, hearing her talk, to these bones it's almost like Sammy's come back. Something tumbled in Fortuna's gut. Sammy? Oh. Sir Miles chuckled to himself. A nickname, that's all. Between me, Castor, Melissa, and old Charcoal Hand himself. Haven't heard in years, to be honest. Sadness flickered in Miles' eyes. Sammy was like a cousin to me. Only she died young and left the rest of us here, picking up the pieces. You loved her, Fortuna said. It was so obvious. Iroh. The Grey Bear shook his head. Not like that. I didn't. I couldn't. But she saved my life, and for that reason I served the Maruli until the scales are balanced once more. What about me then? Fortuna insisted. Why have you tolerated me, trained me all these years? They raised their sword. Don't tell me. I've had enough sparring for tonight. Sir Miles shook his head. But know this, Fortuna, Whisker, Detian, whatever. You're as much Lady Shoshana's child as the rest. You're the one who got her voice, after all. I'm touched. After the sword was back on the rack, Fortuna massaged the spots where the Grey Bear's blade had found their flesh. Thanks, Miles. I really needed that. Any time. Miles looked off into the dark. Though he smiled, to Fortuna it seemed they had merely exchanged upsets. Hey, Miles. Fortuna rose. What were you running from when Lady Samira found you? Even in the gloom, Miles' expression was ice-hard. Ghosts. Or what should now be only ghosts. Should? Sir Miles shook his head. I've already said too much. Leave a man his secrets, won't you? A man, sure, Fortuna wondered. But what about me? Something on your mind? Miles asked as they climbed the uneven stair back to the cloister. What isn't? More than I'd like, Fortuna whispered. Sir Miles, promise me something. Would you? Depends. Fortuna sighed. Miles, if you ever have concerns, would you share them with me? Miles ran a hand through his short hair. Well? Quiet. Miles put a finger to his lips. Someone's coming. Silently, the two ducked behind a corner. Soon a pair of cloaked figures entered the yard from the great hall. They were carrying traveling packs. Iroh, Fortuna whispered. Part of them would have been shocked, but they had already given all the shock they had to give. Is this truly necessary? Iroh asked from below. How else? Eggenhand's caw cut through the gloom. This is what you yourself wished for, and so you must divest everything of you. Yes, Eggenhand, Iroh replied as he began pulling open the gate to the greater yard. Beyond horses soon began to whinny. The two then passed, though at the last moment he turned back. Fortuna froze, thinking he had seen them. But then he turned and Egg in hand was gone. "There I guide our strikes," Fortuna whispered. "Iroh, what have you done?" "What? He's leaving." The words were cold. "Running away under cover of dark. With Egg in hand." "Of course he is." Sir Miles glanced sideways at Fortuna. "Go on." "Brother Preston," Fortuna confessed. "He thinks Egg in hand is an impostor, here only to take a life. But I know better. Egg in hand shot Iroh to rob him of any path but going with him, and this proves it. That man, he's worse than a cutthroat. He's one of the High Ordinators, officially no more than 300. Few syndicates held the same mix of fear and awe as the Temple Ordinators. Protected by but not beholden to the Temple of the Triarchy, little about them was known save for their mission, to catalog and curb all which threatened the Temple's order, by any means necessary. For that they had earned their pseudonym, the Inquisition. Many claimed they had eyes and ears everywhere, and that a burned hamlet or vanished person was as much their doing as any bandit gangs. All for certain, however, was that, being a monastic order, the Ordinators divested themselves from all lands, holdings, titles, and inheritances upon initiation. Sir Miles glanced sideways at Fortuna. "What?" "You explain it then," Fortuna snapped. "The secrecy, the entrapment, the demand that Iroh divest himself of everything? Egg in hand lied. He knew all along and followed him here. This was his plan the whole time." Soon after, the whinnying died, replaced by the groan of turning wheels. It was the main gate. Soon after, the rumbling ceased and the pre-dawn gloom again settled into silence. "And he's gone," Fortuna said softly. "Just like that, without saying goodbye." "So he is." Sir Miles clasped Fortuna on the shoulder. "Go get some rest, Fortuna. Dawn's not far off, and your mood will improve with a bit of sleep." This time they found shy Estelle waiting. Fortuna rose with the dawn. In the great hall, Kanta and Meg were already waiting, one perched atop the Marulai's throne, the other at her left. "Iroh is gone," Fortuna announced as they entered. "We know," Kanta replied in her normal, disinterested voice. Fortuna clenched their fist, feeling the tendons pull against bone. Before they could respond, though, Kanta raised an arm, robed in black satin like one of the old man of the mountain's mighty wings, and spoke. "Come here, please. We have much work to do." Fortuna nodded and took the place at Kanta's right. Soon the first petitioner arrived. He was a man, 30, with chestnut hair and fearful eyes. "You," Fortuna thought. "You may approach Kansa Marula," they announced, "Lady of Castle Ravencroft." "Your Grace." The man shook as he bowed. "State your name and purpose," Meg ordered. "No need," Fortuna interjected. "I know you. You're Martinez, the lavender farmer. State your business." The man's words were a mess of broken syllables. "The Lord Lucian Marula. He found me guilty of arson and ordered me back here this morning to receive punishment equal to my offense." "Did my lord brother state what your punishment should be?" Kanta asked. Sweat glistening on his brow, the man opened his mouth, but no words came out. Kanta's eyes narrowed. "No matter. I will give punishment as I see fit." "Wait!" The man shook. "The lashes! He ordered me to have the lashes!" Kanta sat still for a moment. "Tarek, Marcus." A snap echoed through the hall. "Seize this man and have the gates opened." "The gates?" Fortuna turned to Kanta. "Yes," Kanta replied, their eyes wrought iron. "There is something I must do." In a minute, Kanta had assembled the 3 remaining household guards and several more soldiers. With them, Kanta, Meg, and Fortuna escorted Martinez across the great bridge to the town square of Ravencroft Village. There, on a platform used for ceremonies and sacrifices, Kanta had Martinez forced to his knees before a crowd of growing onlookers. "Meg," Kanta whispered. "The knout." After handing it over, Meg stepped forward. "Here, people of Ravencroft Village," she cried, her voice first a waver. "Lady Kanta, your liege, now rules Erdonia in her father's absence. Behold her and her justice!" Cheers followed. "See this man Martinez." Meg's confidence grew with every word. "A lavender farmer, confessed to the crime of arson. He burned down his own neighbor's farm, digging a ditch so the flames would not damage his own crops." Mingled boos and hisses came from the crowd. "Scoundrel!" one shouted. Fortuna winced. They had to do something. Is this what we built? Or is this just a role they've long known how to play? They stood there, stone-faced, as tendons pulled against bone. For his transgression, Meg's hand flourished, he shall receive penalty so that he will never hurt anyone ever again. Witness the justice of our ancestors, of our emperor! The crowd cheered as Cantus stepped forward, the knout's tails billowing in the faint morning breeze. She raises the whip, a whisper on her lips, and brings it down upon Martinez's still-clothed back. Crack. 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 Fortuna stood there, unable to look away. Crack.